Mark, you can introduce yourself and y'all's company. I mean, I met you guys through reading about the news of the unfortunate circumstances that you guys were facing. And you and I got talking, and your team got talking about ways that we might be able to help. In the end, you went through a few different iterations. Well, more than a few, but a number of iterations. And in the end, sort of settled on trying to do, I would call it a pre-pack in American parlance or scheme of arrangement under the Seychelles laws. Do you want to walk everybody through maybe a little bit of background and then go through the proposal?
Absolutely. So I've been in crypto for 10 years, running exchanges the whole time. I started the first UK Bitcoin exchange 4 years ago. I started CoinFLEX with Sudo. We encountered a huge issue with a defaulting client where we basically became insolvent. This was a client we had a contractual agreement with. We had a default. And as a result of that, we basically were looking at different options. Do we do this, do that? And I started speaking to Thomas, who's got a lot of experience in restructurings and bankruptcies and distressed assets and debt purchasing and different things. And so we started speaking to Thomas, started speaking to a whole bunch of different people who were looking to invest in the company, people who were looking to do all sorts of different things. And lawyers got involved as they usually do. Our general counsel was leading lots of conversations with lots of different law firms around, different possible outcomes. And it became pretty clear that although there were investors interested in investing in CoinFLEX, they were really interested in investing in a company where they weren't going to be plugging a large hole. They were going to be investing in effectively a clean and restructured business. And so we started looking at that route. So looking at routes where we could restructure the obligations via the courts of Seychelles, via a well-established process. And through that process, basically clean up the balance sheet and also bring our customers into being shareholders. We thought about what assets we could distribute to our customers and our creditors. We are issuing RBUSD. We're also issuing shares, and we're also distributing the remainder minus a holdout for operating company and funding litigation, the remainder of assets in the form of USDC. It's been a pretty intense last few months, I would say, because anytime you have this type of, obviously, I've never happened to me before, but speaking to lots of people who've gone through this process has been really helpful, as well as people like Thomas who've kind of been on the other side of dealing with companies that have gone through these types of processes has been really helpful. And basically, anytime you have just a very, very large number of people, large types of constituencies, we have customers that are Flex USD holders, we have customers that have just deposited stuff to CoinFLEX, we have we're the smart BCH bridge. And so we have a bunch of creditors. They've deposited BCH into the bridge and they've withdrawn BCH onto the smart BCH network. And so just this complex situation. And also, a group of Series B investors that have prior to all this had invested in the business. Anytime you have this type of complex situation, there's just a lot of constituencies to put together. And it becomes a question of what's fair, what works for everyone, et cetera. And we learned, there's a lot of ways this can go down. And, one of those ways is more of a liquidation scenario. The other way is where if you can get your creditors to come together and agree, you can restructure the business. And so this was something we had learned a lot about and have effectively put together. And we've put out a term sheet to the general public, and we're very much looking forward to hopefully having our creditors vote in the affirmative on that term sheet and restructuring the business.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks. And I can imagine what it's like. When did this actually start? Remind me. And what were some of the other paths you looked at? I mean, I kind of remember some of them, but just to help people feel like a lot of stuff was pursued before, kind of considering doing the Seychelles pre-pack.
It started June 23rd, but entering into restructuring started after that. Basically, the nice thing about the Seychelles process, and we picked Seychelles when we were incorporating because they were a very crypto derivatives friendly jurisdiction. But effectively, we got lucky when we picked that jurisdiction as well, because they are very friendly towards expedient restructuring processes. And they've also been open to the idea of a vote using tokens on the blockchain on this website called Snapshot. Snapshot is kind of commonly used in DeFi projects for governance. We're just very grateful from the perspective of having friendly creditors and investors, and then also very grateful from the perspective of having a jurisdiction that is open-minded with respect to crypto and is also able to handle these things pretty quickly.
Just so people get a sense, give me some idea about the size of your company and the amount of creditors you guys had.
Yeah, prior to all this, we were about 80 people. We've laid a number of people off. But I mean, again, prior to this, we were making really significant revenues, in some cases, multiple millions in revenue. And sorry, what was the second question?
Oh, just the size of the creditor body, like how many creditors or account holders, I guess, and because you didn't really have any other creditors other than the account holders, did you?
Yeah,
Well, you had the Series B and whatnot. You had other constituencies, but you didn't have any other creditors.
we actually did. So we had several thousand customer creditors that were directly users of the platform. And then other creditors outside of that included a whole ton of FlexUSD users and Smart BCH users that had actually obtained these tokens in the secondary markets. So if you had never signed up to the platform, but had obtained FlexUSD by trading in DeFi, for example, you might have sold some assets into FlexUSD on a deck, you actually became a creditor as well, or you became a creditor the moment you obtained that FlexUSD. And so there's kind of several thousand creditors on the platform, and then even more than that off the platform on the blockchain.
Okay. Going forward, what are the next steps you see for the company? It sounds like you guys have the vote, and that's why, or anticipated to have the vote. But tell me next steps, and then you guys envision.
Yeah, absolutely. So really the next step, the direct next step, we've issued the vote tokens. So these are called CFV, CoinFLEX vote tokens, and people can withdraw those. And it's very important, if you are listening and you are a customer of the platform with assets locked on the platform, it's very important that you actually withdraw your CFV that you were issued today or tomorrow, because on Sunday at 8 a.m. UTC time, we will be doing a snapshot, and we'll be launching the proposal on snapshot.org. And so that proposal will basically snapshot everyone who's holding CFV at that moment in time and allow those people to vote on that proposal in the affirmative or vote no. And that vote will take place over the next roughly close to 48 hours. So it'll take place until Tuesday. And that vote will effectively determine the outcome of the next step in the process, which is the court reviewing the vote and the procedure and the term sheet, and basically confirming, in the success case, confirming that we do indeed have 75% of the creditors voting yes for this proposal. So that's really the key thing, is having 75% of the people that are voting vote yes. And once we have that, it moves to the next step. And once the court has approved, then we'll distribute the assets and get on to doing our business in a restructured business.
Just drop in there, this is all right. It's 75% by value of creditors. So that's the threshold that we need to pass in terms of the number of, when we have the votes, 75% of value of creditors who vote need to approve it in order for it to be then binding and for us to be able to then apply to the court.
Yeah, under Seychelles laws. Okay, that's great. Great clarification. And, it's really fascinating. I'm like looking through the proposal, and, we've talked about this a few times, but I mean, basically it's an equitization of the, what do you want to call it, the losses or the whole to the creditors, with some sort of, it's 65% of the equity to creditors, looks like 15% held back for management. And then I guess the Series B and the Smart BCH,
Yep.
I guess, are getting the remainder.
Yeah, the creditors are getting the 65%, which includes the Smart BCH. So the Series B are the Series B are getting that remainder.
I'm just curious, like we spoke, throughout you were going through the process, but just in terms of other people that have other restructurings going on, it's just kind of a general question. I'm sure you shopped around like proposals to try to restructure. I mean, you guys went the route of actually equitizing the debt, really, versus like a sale process or any sort of capital raising process. Did you try the other route? So can you kind of give some color? Because it sounds like this is the best way to handle these situations if you believe in the platform. But can you give some color on what your experience was with the different approaches?
Yeah, I can do that. And I could probably say as well, like what might have improved the process even further, because I think we so far have been pretty fast, but relative to other restructuring processes, but even more speed would have been even better. So we looked at selling the business, and we looked at whether that was possible. And basically, there was a number of folks that approached us and that we approached, and the hole was too big relative to people's balance sheets and the size of the business. And so the hole was too big. There wasn't appetite in buying it. There was appetite in investing in the business post restructuring, and we're going to continue to explore those plans.
Great.
Yeah, but the thing I would say as well is, so far it's been a few months, and I think a lot of people have gone through a lot of sort of pain and confusion and uncertainty. And in some of these cases, it's many years. I mean, just one example is Mt. Gox, which I know is something you have a lot of experience in. But in some cases, it's been several years or even a decade on these things. I think if we could have done, we would have pushed for some type of process that even predetermined all of this stuff and made it such that there was able to be an immediate resolution to this issue. If we could have done that, week 2 or something, that would have been the dream. And I think going forward, we're not going to change the articles such that there's some provision for that. But what we are going to do as much as we can is make the business so indestructible such that this can't happen again, or at least to the degree that it's humanly and physically possible to make this impossible, we will make it impossible. And the main ways we're thinking about that is around decentralizing custody. So, right now we're in exchange with custody of client funds. We are in control of these assets. That led to us being able to offer manual margin to users, and manual margin was something that shouldn't have been offered. But the other thing is, really in being an exchange, your goal is to allow people to facilitate trading. And I think being a leveraged exchange, being a futures exchange, there is a lot of value to having centralized risk management processes. But really, as an exchange, you do want people to have the least requirements to have to trust you as possible. And well, that's interesting, because that means you actually don't want to have control of people's funds. Because if you have control of people's funds, they have to have a higher degree of trust in your platform. And that's another point of friction. If you're an exchange, you want to minimize friction, whether it's liquidity and distance between the bid and the offer, whether it's trading fees and being competitive there, whether it's latency between servers and the user servers, whether it's some other type of friction. And really, trust is one of the biggest areas of friction. And so that's something we're going to be looking to minimize, if not eradicate, as well.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and just to put pin to that, I mean, I heard about some of the business initiatives you guys were working on as part of our discussions, and it sounds like creditors will get to enjoy what other kind of business developments happen in the future with the company. So that's clearly one of the benefits of giving a full sort of debt for equity swap versus either a sale of the company. I don't know. Where do you want to take it from here?
Well, I think there's probably people on here that are very familiar with our process. There's probably people on here that are from your Twitter audience, and so they're very familiar with your background. But it would be kind of fun to cross-pollinate those two. And just if you could talk a bit about your background and in this kind of distressed industry.
Oh, sure.
I think that'd be useful as well.
Yeah, I'll try not to be too, droning on. I think Seychelles pre-pack, I'd never been involved in one. So when you guys originally approached me and says, hey, we're thinking of Seychelles, I was like, Seychelles pre-pack. Okay, what's the requirement to get it done? And when I heard 75%, I was worried you guys were going to have a tough time getting the votes. And that's, and I just never, been involved in Seychelles. So I was sort of saying like, hey, you should consider the US, and maybe I even said consider the UK, but just try other pre-pack regimes that have a lower vote threshold. And you and I kicked around alternative structures. And I think this makes the most sense because creditors are kind of in it for the long run, and in terms of like, instead of like getting cash now for whatever you'd sell the business for, they're getting like the equity in the business. But when it comes to the additional like token recovery that you're giving, assuming that's a potential recovery for creditors as opposed to just selling it. And when you have distressed investors, like they have to buy things at discounts because it's distressed. I mean, you're buying houses that are on fire. So to be fair to the buyers and the people that offer capital in these situations, it's hard for them to get fully comfortable with the situation or a C-suite when, they're calling you when they've had a boo-boo. So, my experience is it is tough to do true debt for equity, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And you guys appear to have pulled a rabbit out of a hat here, which is fantastic for your creditors and your customers. So I really applaud y'all's efforts, because it is. I assume you guys haven't slept in months. I can only
Correct.
imagine all
Yep.
the iterations of going back and forth and negotiating with the different people that want different things, and trying to keep everybody kind of on the same hymn sheet. And for yourselves, I mean, you guys own a business here that I don't know, like pre this issue, you probably raised money at a few $100 million valuation, and now you're looking at like, hey, do I protect my interest here, or do I try to be a bit magnanimous and figure out a way to get this done? And if that means giving up a big chunk of my ownership, so be it, to kind of get the wheels turning. So I applaud that. I applaud that approach, because you don't see it every day in the restructuring area. You tend to see people sort of digging in and deciding, no, I want my pie and your pie.
Yeah.
It can get testy, But right now it's tough. My general take on the crypto markets is I'm a long-term believer in the space. But as you guys can appreciate, this is not the only situation that's going through a restructuring or a needed restructuring, whether it's like a full, court process, or just like, hey, we don't have enough revenue to feed all of our employees. Like, we can't keep this payroll. Like, we're going to be out of business. And so there's a lot of carnage right now in the space. And what that means is that it's hard to either sell assets or raise capital. So again, that's why you want to do debt for equity swaps. It's such a cyclical area, the crypto space, that right now even the big players are kind of looking at their loan books, looking at their portfolio companies and saying like, hey, no new deals. Let's just protect what we've got. Make sure that we don't have any more losses, or make sure that our companies that are our babies have capital and we can give them more capital. So that's why it's paramount to try to do these sort of debt for equity swaps. Mark, I know you guys have been, the Celsius and the Voyager, really more Celsius, I guess, has been a bit more contentious with some of the spaces. But just to put it out there, this is really more focused on what the guys here have done and we're able to accomplish, and to try to shed a little light on anybody that's a creditor. This will be recorded, and you can go back and listen to it, and I'm sure reach out to the guys with direct questions. And I like the novel use of sounds like a token to do the actual voting, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, we're really excited about that token, because obviously it is an asset. It does need to be distributed, and by effectively distributing that asset in the form of a token, it really gives choice to users in whether they want to sell it, whether they want to hold out, at what price they want to sell it. And we've gotten multiple offers to buy out that claim, and so I think this is one that makes for a much more interesting marketplace and gives people liquidity as well. Someone could buy it at one price, and even rather than holding out the full period, they could sell it at some higher price. And so kind of gives for more trading opportunities and investment opportunities than just other avenues for that asset to be distributed. And I wanted to also, because you're quite involved kind of across the crypto space of sort of special situations, distressed assets and bankruptcies and stuff. What do you think about maybe some of the other situations that are going on? And I mean, maybe in the context of CoinFLEX, but even just, what do you think about some of those, regardless of the context of CoinFLEX?
Some situations are messier than others. I think some of the so like the Voyager and the Celsius are much larger creditor bodies, so it's very hard to get cohesion. And I guess also predominantly have a lot of U.S. operations and chose to file in the States. I suppose that Celsius could have filed in the U.K. as like a Part 26A. I've only been involved in one Part 26A, which is their sort of, I wouldn't say it's their pre-pack, but it's kind of like their debtor in possession. You could have done something like along those lines, but I think that they chose to file in the States because, you have someone who's large equity owners and they think like, well, this is where I'll get the most control and the most flexibility. So let's file there. It's not disheartening because I think the American process is good, but, I think some of the creditors probably might beg to differ. And I think part of it is the jurisdiction they've chosen, but part of it is the people involved. No offense to any of the principals at either firm. And I'm hearing, that the Voyager auction has gone okay, but not amazing. But again, it's like people will have liquidity sooner rather than later. And to the credit of the C-suite there, they came out of the box after the petition date and basically filed a plan and said, look, we're going to do a total debt for equity swap where creditors are going to own the company. So very similar to what you proposed. And we're going to do a dual process. So we're going to run an auction, see if we can get something for the company. If no one buys it, we're toggling to this plan. So very, very similar to what you guys proposed. And right out of the gate, no funny business. And I can't say all the cases I've either looked at or am involved in have a similar bent to them. Not just the public ones, but a few private deals that we're looking at. And, if someone owns the equity of a company, they're entitled to take a different tack. But it's tough on the creditors because this is not the bankruptcy of a crappy software company that no one cares about. It's the bankruptcy, that involves a lot of people's savings. I mean, sometimes, your platform, I think, allows people to use leverage and people could consider it more risky, or riskier. But some of the other platforms, the ones that are public, I mean, you're talking about people with their life savings on these platforms. I would say it's unfortunate to see some of it. And I like the idea of people having options. Even on these cases, I think some of the innovations even you're doing here, I mean, think about it. These are global first. I mean, can you think of, there was a recovery token in Bitfinex. Mt. Gox never did a recovery token. I mean, there's still 600,000 missing Bitcoin. Wouldn't that be cool for the creditors to have a recovery token on that?
Yeah.
So I think innovations like that, in crypto, and it doesn't have to be necessarily cryptography so much as technology, coming in the restructuring process through the crypto restructurings, that'll be great for the process. So I'm hopeful that it'll be a benefit to the process over time. And yeah, I'm talking too much, but
No.
Is it okay if we let a few of the people up that are up here maybe ask a question? Maybe they have a question about your process versus another process and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, are people able to comment? I think.
Oh, I let a few people up. Alan and I think the other Farouk. Is that how you say your name? If you guys want to go for it, ask a question.
Hey, Thomas and Mark, thank you guys so much for holding this space. 2 questions really quickly. I think Thomas, you said that in order for a plan to get approved, it's not just by numbers, it's by 75% of the value of the estate. Was that correct?
75% of the value of creditors who vote. So is that clear?
Yeah, so in other words, creditors that have larger claims essentially have a more weighted, their vote is
Correct.
heavily. Okay,
Correct.
Cool. And then Thomas, another question is, a lot of people hear this solution of using coins as a way out of this and immediately dismiss it, saying the judge won't understand it, he's not going to allow it. Is that a valid argument, or how would you respond to that?
Ask the question one more time. You were referring to the Celsius and Voyager bankruptcies?
Correct. The IOU tokens.
It's not that the judge wouldn't allow IOU tokens. It's a much larger creditor body, and they operate onshore in the States and in a number of jurisdictions where you do have to pass, regulators, more so than I think Mark and them have the benefit. I mean, they can tell you about their business more than I can. I mean, what jurisdictions do you guys operate or offer your services in?
Yeah, so there's multiple entities involved in CoinFLEX, obviously, but the main CoinFLEX.com is basically most of the world ex-US. And that's the entity that's going through the restructuring. That's the entity that's going to set up other entities that are going to set up the RVUSD tokens, for example, and those will all be in Seychelles. I think, yeah, we do get a lot of benefit from this process being, in the Seychelles in that sense, effectively.
I was gonna say, Mark. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, you guys. I assume you guys are trying to play by the rules, and part of it is wherever you go, you have to make sure you're compliant. And if you can't offer your services there, it hampers your growth, but it also keeps you out of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the cool things about this token from a regulatory perspective, and Arash might have further comments on this, is that it is going to be, if the proposal is voted on and approved, it is going to be a court-mandated token. So from that perspective, if users will have any questions about whether Seychelles is okay with this, well, the only way that it gets issued is actually if the court mandates that we issue it. So, Arash, maybe you have other comments on that?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. The proposal that we are going to the creditors is pursuant to, say, an interim order from the Seychelles court. So they have already, understand that there is this type of structure that we would be proposing to creditors, and now we are finalized the terms, and we're seeking the final approval. And once we've received the final approval, we will then, from final approval of creditors, we will then go and receive final approval from the court itself. So it's interesting and unique, and it's actually quite novel.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't see too many questions up, but Mark or Arish, did you guys have any other areas that you wanted to try to cover regarding your proposal? Or you wanted to highlight or talk about?
No, I think it's good. I mean, appreciate the exposure and your feedback in this process as well. And yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the vote goes. If you're listening, again, just a reminder, if you're listening and you do have locked assets in CoinFLEX, please remember to withdraw the CFV tokens before Sunday. And if you have any type of CoinFLEX asset like FlexUSD or Smart BCH, please do remember to vote between the Sunday and Tuesday. And just, thanks for everyone who came and joined the space, and for everyone who asked a question. And yeah, thanks to everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys. If anybody has any questions, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys? Twitter DM, your website? What are your thoughts?
I think the area where we're probably the most responsive is the CoinFLEX Telegram. So if you go to CoinFLEX_EN, that's our official Telegram. You can hit me up on Twitter as well. And you can also hit me up on my Telegram, which is @MarkDavidLamb. But the best way to reach us is just commenting in the general CoinFLEX Telegram.
Very cool. Well, guys, again, congrats. It sounds like you wouldn't be announcing this if you didn't think you had the votes, but it's important to tell everybody to vote. And the Telegram group. So I'm on it right now, CoinFLEX_EN.
Awesome. Cool.
Mark, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks.
Best of luck with it.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. See you.
Talk soon, guys.